Thunder Grunt.
Hey guys!
Bob.
Hey Bob, what's
Hey, well, welcome to Writers Blockbusters, the show where we treat the final edit of a movie like it's the script. But today, we're gonna treat the final edit of a pilot like it's the script. But first, I want you guys to introduce yourselves.
I am Jimmy George. I am a screenwriter and script consultant. My Twitter handle is @JimmyRGeorge.
I am Jamie Nash. I'm a screenwriter and the writer of Save the Cat Writes for TV,
Woo!
which I'll be saying from now on to sell my copies of my book that I desperately need to sell.
Right.
But that's fine.
And you're @Jamie_Nash on Twitter, right?
@Jamie_Nash at Twitter.
Right. And I'm Bob Rose,
On
and
Twitter.
I am apparently mentioned in Jamie Nash's book, so I'm immortal now. So thank you, Jamie.
Man,
Right.
thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you for spell checking.
And today we're gonna talk about something that I think concerns your book a little bit, which is the pilot episode of Cobra Kai.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. It's the show that inspired me to write the book. No, it's not. It'd be good if it was.
You could lie if you want.
Yeah. It's
But-
the only reason to understand the depths of this pilot. I had to write a book.
So yeah,
I got a PhD in Cobra Kai.
for
from
anyone
Harvard.
listening to clarify.
Strike hard.
That's
right.
right. No mercy. For anyone listening, to clarify, today we are talking about the pilot episode of Cobra Kai. We're not talking about the entire show. We're not talking about the Karate Kid franchise. Just the pilot, right?
hmm
That's right.
I just want to
the
clarify
pilot.
the opening for anyone listening. They're like, why aren't they saying this? Or like, there's just this.
Just the pilot. And the reason why, and this is a little bit of book stuff. And first of all, thanks. The guys are entertaining me because my book is just coming out. It's coming out on March 30th, but technically Amazon released the print copy early, like 2 weeks early for some crazy reason, which all of a sudden it showed up at my door and everybody was like, why is it showing up at our doors? But we'll take it. So the book is really pilot focused. So the book itself, it tells you how to create a show. It tells you how to come up with the first season, and it tells you how to like break a pilot story. So come up with your pilot story. But really, all those things are in service of writing a pilot, or maybe like a little pitch treatment. Because as writers, that's all we really need to write. You don't have to go and write 5 seasons of a show until the show is bought and you have a writer's room. And, writing's a team sport. And this show is this Cobra Kai pilot was written by many people. But, you can imagine if you were a new writer, the way to sell this would be to create a pilot or create a pitch. So that's why we're watching the pilot in particular, not like doing season 1 and seeing what's instructive about writing an entire season of television.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Well, then that begs the question, Jamie, who wrote this shit?
yeah, who wrote this shit? So one, this is based on characters created by Robert Mark Kamen. And Robert Mark Kamen is like, when people ask me who my favorite screenwriter is in some ways, I say he hasn't written my, all my top movies or anything like Lawrence Kasdan. He's had this journeyman career I wish I could have, like any screenwriter, written a lot of different things. So he wrote the original Karate Kid movies. He wrote Gladiator was one of his movies. Yeah. He wrote Lethal Weapon 3. He wrote the Transporter series. He was the writer behind that. He wrote Taken. So he's had this long career of all these different, a lot of action movies in there and stuff. He wrote Taps before he wrote Karate Kid.
Nice.
Anyway,
I mean, it's solid work. It's a solid career.
He's had this long career of all these different genres.
If I'm not mistaken, the guys responsible. Two of them, at least, are the Hot Tub Time Machine guys, right?
They're the Hot Tub Time Machine guys,
which is a movie I greatly love and respect.
Love it.
Love Hot Tub Time Machine quite a bit. So,
this pilot and the show was created by Josh Held, Hayden Schlossberg, and John Hurwitz. Are they all three of those the Hot Tub Time Machine guys? I think they might be. I think was it a trio, or I think it might be a trio.
I will check while you're talking.
Yeah, I have it up here. I just don't have all three of them up is the tricky thing, but I guess if you looked up Hot Tub Time Machine,
I feel like they all had something to do with it.
I think you're right. So they created this thing, as their baby. They're the showrunners of it. It's their main thing now. And then there's Stacey Harmon gets a credit as executive story editor, and Michael Jonathan Smith gets a credit as staff writer. But I guess that's for everything. Let me see if that's for the full season. Yeah, that's the full season. That's probably not the pilot.
According to IMDb, it was Josh Held. And you said John Morris and Sean Anders were responsible for writing Hot Tub Time Machine. So,
okay.
I guess.
Yeah, it's Josh Held, John Hurwitz, and Hayden Schlossberg.
So it's just Josh Held that was involved with Hot Tub Time Machine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm trying to remember what. Oh, I know what it was. This is why I get it confused. Harold and Kumar.
That's
it's kind of the same.
Same tone.
It's the same kind of wacky thing, that a movie I like. And they also I know he produced or wrote a movie that a friend of mine was in on Blockers.
I love
Blockers. Is great.
Yeah,
great.
Really underrated.
So another plug, Jimmy Bellinger, who was in a short I directed that will be premiering on March 30th at the Garden State Film Festival, A Comedy of Horrors, Volume 1. So check out Blockers, Jimmy Bellinger.
This is great.
There you go. So yeah, they did the Harold and Kumar stuff, and an American Reunion as well.
Right.
So.
Oh, okay, cool.
So that's the guys.
So they've really been living in a pure comedy space until I guess that'll bring us to a tone later for this show, right?
The Hot Tub Time Machine thing is really interesting. Jamie, do you think that has something to do with, because it was Hot Tub Time Machine is such an 80s throwback?
Also,
do you think that they were like, what other 80s ideas do you have since you had such success with the 80s throwback?
Couldn't you say like Rod Corddry's character almost has like shades of Johnny in this?
Absolutely.
Yeah, like same man at a time.
It's funny when I think of this thing. I mean, this thing really was almost a YouTube video, right? Well, there was a YouTube video.
It was originally a YouTube Red series. I watched the first season on YouTube Red.
No, but he's talking about there's a video that went viral.
Yeah.
Okay.
Reimagines Daniel as the villain.
Oh, yeah.
It was It was like, who's the real bad guy in Karate Kid? And it got really popular. And it almost seemed like that was their sizzle reel. I mean, I know they didn't have anything to do with it, but you could see where they went back to YouTube and said, look, this had 10 million hits. Why don't we do a show like this? And they were like, yeah, let's do it. Also, if I remember right, and I should look this up too, didn't William Zabka, wasn't he on How I Met Your Mother and played himself or something? I remember. Yeah.
Okay. Repeatedly, not just
repeatedly.
Once, repeatedly.
Yeah. I sort of had a vague memory of that.
And he's very much like this character.
Right. He kind of played himself. I don't know. Played his character as himself.
You guys probably won't remember this either, but there was a very popular Funny or Die short with Daniel LaRusso seeing the remake of Karate Kid and being completely depressed. Like he was kind of Johnny in this show, but in real life, I think the franchise has had shades of this kind of joke for decades.
So I love like thinking about all the different things that gave birth to this.
Right?
Yeah. So that's probably enough of the history of it. But also, it premiered on YouTube Red. They did 2 seasons. They got out of the fictional business, the scripted business, I think altogether. And it eventually went over to Netflix. So.
And it exploded. Became the number 1 TV show in the world for 2020, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk about what pilots must do, right? Is that where we are?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so here's the thing, I talked about why pilots are so important to new writers. And of course, that's what we're going to talk about today with Cobra Kai and see what we can learn from it. But here's the thing about pilots. Pilots are, if you want to break into television, they're going to ask you to submit scripts. They're not going to let you pitch. The funny thing is most shows are sold by pitches. Like most shows, they'll go to Aaron Sorkin and they'll say, what do you got? And he'll go, I got Cobra Kai. Can you imagine Aaron Sorkin?
Aaron Sorkin writing Cobra Kai.
Aaron Sorkin's Cobra Kai. And he'll then pitch something and then they'll hire him to write a pilot. And if they like the pilot, they'll make the pilot, stuff like that. That's how normal business is conducted in television. However, for new writers, the way it works, it's very different than screenwriting in some regard. Your job is to try to get a day job, essentially. You're auditioning to work on Cobra Kai. You want to be one of the people, one of the 8 people or however many they have that sits in a room and goes 9 to 5 for a few months, and they write on a whiteboard and they say, what's the show about? That's what you're doing as a television writer. They're called writers' rooms. And the way to get on those writers' rooms, I mean, it's not this easy, but what you need is you need original scripts. And nowadays, back in the day, they used to let you submit what were called specs in the television business. And specs in the television business would be like, they're famous ones like it's the Happy Days episode where Richie finds Fonzie's little black book and it's got all men in it or something like that. But they're episodes of pre-existing television shows that you write and would submit. That's the old days. Nowadays, almost every showrunner, and I asked a bunch writing this book, and they basically said they want originals, they want pilots, they don't want specs. Every now and then you'll find this weird unicorn that says, I want to see you write an episode of Cobra Kai, or something, or Hawaii Five-0. But nowadays, they almost all want originals, which means if you're in TV, you want to write a pilot, a TV pilot. But here's the catch-22 of TV pilots. It's like the hardest thing to write in screenwriting is a TV pilot. It is the hardest thing to write because it's a sales pitch. It's a promise of a great show. It's a setup for a great show. It has to introduce great characters that you want to invite into your living room every week. It has to do all these things. And on top of that, you as a new writer have to make a kind of you on a plate script, something that introduces your voice, what makes you great. And it's kind of this you on a plate script. So it's like the hardest thing to possibly do, but that's kind of what you're tasked to do if you want to break into television. So anyway, that's what a pilot must do.
I guess it's a blueprint without having all the information.
It's true.
Yeah,
it's true. Because in some ways it's a show pitch, but it also, on top of all those things that I just mentioned, it also has to be a cathartic story because they want to see that you know how to tell a beginning, middle, end kind of story. So it can't just be a setup. It can't, if they just asked you to write a setup for a movie, you could do 30 pages of just a setup and then the thing. But in a TV show, it needs the midpoint twist. It needs the all is lost. It needs all those things. But it also has to be a great setup. So it's this weird, it's a very weird task to be asked to do, especially for a new writer trying to break in. Hey, do the hardest thing.
Hey, write a complete story, but it's not complete at all. Okay.
That's right.
Right. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And I mean, I can rip to the next part.
Yeah, go for it, please.
So to do a great pilot, here's the other big problem. You can't write a great pilot unless you have a great show. You can't write a great pilot for a show that sucks. That'd be really hard, or just a boring. Imagine the worst television show idea. Imagine trying to write a pilot for that. It'd be really difficult. So not only are you now tasked with writing an original pilot, but now you're tasked with coming up with an original show that will be, grab eyeballs. It'll make people sit up and pay attention. So the first thing you have to do is come up with a great show. And the book actually has a lot of brainstorm sections I use to create a great show. And there's really 3 main things that I think to start, your creation, your brainstorming of a great show. One is coming up with a fresh world. even though there are shows like Seinfeld or something like that aren't so much worlds but point of views, those are usually shows that are created by stand-up comics or somebody with like a really specific point of view.
Right.
Almost all the great shows you can think of have some new world or some interesting world at its start. And then you pair that with what I call a franchise type. And where the franchise type comes from is when I used to pitch TV shows, they would ask this question. I'm not sure that they ask this as much anymore, but they'd say, what's the franchise, right? And you'd be like, I don't know what the hell that means. What's a franchise? It sounds like a real like cigar chompy kind of, right. Hey kid, what's the franchise? Yeah, it sounds like that. So I came up with this list of franchise types, and the franchise types are story engines, essentially. That's really what a franchise is. That's what it means. It means what's the reoccurring conflict that create episode after episode, year after year. What is the thing that makes this a reoccurring thing and not just a one and done? Or what's the thing that makes it stretch?
Would that be?
So,
I guess, as somebody who's a novice here,
absolutely. As somebody who hasn't read the book,
I have not. I ordered it right before we started, so don't be too mad at me. Would this be something like, per se, a Freak of the Week engine, like on a Buffy type television show? You have a Hellmouth that's open, and then you have constant monsters that can show up at all times, keeping the story going, right?
So, Bob, you win a free book.
Awesome, sweet.
One of the first types I created, and these are very similar. If you know Save the Cat and the genre types, they're similar to that, but these are for show creation as opposed to story creation. But one of them is called Blank of the Week. That's one of my ones. So that and Buffy would be an example of that.
I love how that's a blank canvas, because like if you're doing like a lawyer show.
Case of the week.
Case of the week. Like, yeah. Exactly.
I mean, like I would say, like all of the Arrowverse and everything is predicated upon that, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And even something like The Mandalorian, while it has a serialized storyline, it kind of settles into a bit of a blank of the week. It's kind of like the adventure of the week.
Mission of the week.
The mission of the week.
Bounty of the week. Yes.
Bounty of the week. Whatever it is. So that's one of the types. And I won't go into all of them because you got to buy the book.
I did, and you should too.
But can you guess what some of the other ones would be? I mean, if you think about it.
I read the book, so I won't say.
Bob,
okay, if I
guess.
Situational comedy, I would guess.
Exactly.
Like a Seinfeld or something like that.
That's the second one. I call it Trapped Together because it's usually people in a situation. The situation is the trap, and they're stuck together and they have to deal with each other. So that's like the Office, would be a trap together, something like that. Any workplace comedies, anything like that.
Yeah.
They're trapped togethers. Then a lot of the new serialized stuff that we see on Netflix and things like that, they fall into things that almost resemble those Save the Cat genres. So I have things like man or woman with a plan. And that's somebody that has some plan and is trying to execute it. And I actually think Cobra Kai falls into that.
I think that's what it is.
I would agree.
Yeah. Okay, good. I should have waited and asked you.
A test.
And then there's other ones like Dude with a Problem, which we've seen in the genres, which is somebody who has to fight for survival. Maybe
is that like a Sopranos type of thing?
It could be. I'd have to look at the Sopranos. Fugitive is more like
definitely.
That would be it. Prison Break,
24, maybe
24
something like that.
Dude with a Problem. Yeah.
Homeland, things like that. So, and anyway, there's a few more like that, and they're very similar to the genres. But what I suggest to brainstorm pilots, and this is something I actually do, and I go through an exercise in the book. I take a world that I'm interested in, and the one I do in the book is because I've always been a fan of pro wrestling, for example, and then I say, what could pro wrestling be as a trap together, and then, that could be like The Office with pro wrestling or something like that, and then I might go through and say, what could be the blank of the week with wrestling or something, and then I don't know, I might get in some other thing where it's more like an action show or something. So I tend to do that. I take the worlds, the fresh world I want to write about that I'm interested in, and because these things have to be you on a plate, my suggestion is you come up with the worlds you've either lived in, you want to live in, or you want to just create from whole cloth, and come up with those worlds you really love, because that's what you need in your pilot that's going to get you in one of these writers' rooms. You got to kind of say who you are by writing these pilots and landing a gig in a writer's room. So anyway, that's more than enough of crazy.
And
That's great.
I want to bounce off this with talking about Cobra Kai, because Cobra Kai is like an excellent example of geographic specificity. Because I would say 1 out of every 3 scripts I consult on, amateur scripts, is a pilot, and the most common problem I see is they have a world. And the world is memorable, and it's like a wrestling. It's very specific, but it's not geographically specific. So we'll get city, quote unquote. We'll get rural area, quote unquote. And then what happens is there's no like story engine specific to the geographical location. Whereas this one, this could only take place in
the Valley.
Post 1984 All Valley Karate Tournament, Reseda and Encino, California. It's if it was another Encino, California, where the post tournament existed, it wouldn't be this show. So like geographic specificity is so important.
Imagine Seinfeld in North Dakota. It doesn't work.
Right. So.
And that's a very interesting point. So when I talk about worlds, I also have a bunch of breakdowns for what types of worlds there are, right? So some are based purely on location. It's like, just location. Some are jobs. So world really means story arena. This one's a little weird because the story arena is really the Karate Kid.
Yes, exactly.
It's an IP. And that's really what it is. It's, if you look at this, it's whatever the IP of Karate Kid is. Whereas if you were doing your own and it was like wrestling, that'd be a little different.
I was talking more. I guess I should rephrase. I was talking more about setting, which is sort of a companion to world.
No,
I think it fits in there though. It fits right in there. Yeah.
For sure. I think if you were, I think California karate dojos, like if Karate Kid didn't exist, that would be a very specific world. That you might know, but I might not know,
Right.
Or like what's the Danny McBride movie? He had a very specific fist foot way.
The foot fist way.
Foot fist way.
Yeah.
That was the one he broke out with. He had a very specific set of dojos he was looking at in that world. Those are movies. The funny thing is, I think, if you're not into TV pilots, I think you can use the same exercise with the Save the Cat genre.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You could come up with the worlds, go to the Save the Cat genres. It's like I always say, like the brainstorming to me is trying to cross two things that haven't been crossed before. Like that's the thing. So you might have something boring that's been done a million times, like medical show. But if you come up with the weird twist on the medical show, then it's new again, So MASH. Yeah.
Yep. A medical show in Vietnam.
Scrubs.
I mean, Scrubs. To a lesser extent, maybe House. It was Sherlock Holmes.
Turns into Sherlock Holmes. Yeah.
So
exactly.
it's combining the two things that is the key. Bringing the new thing into the old world. So if you have a world that's been done a million times before, especially if you have authenticity in that world, like if you are a doctor or you worked in maybe you were just somebody that worked at the front desk of a medical place, and that's your POV. That authenticity is really important in pilot world, even more so than film world, where film becomes a little bit about high concept and things like that. Pilots really become about character and authenticity, I think. So it's a key thing to think about.
Which is a perfect segue into tone, right?
Tone. Yeah.
Because when it comes to tone with Johnny, right, there's a lot there. There's some nuance.
It's funny because this is a show, like my one friend Chris, who listens to this all the time, like he and I get in a discussion. He's only watched one episode of the show and he doesn't like it. He's like, I think it's kind of cheesy, or I don't know what he said exactly. And I really like this show. Like I can't get enough of it. Like I find it crazily entertaining. But
Jamie, I'm right on the same page with you. Like, I want it really bad. Like, I want more
Yeah.
and more and more, and I don't know why.
And I can't tell because it gets really cheesy and cornball, especially in later years. Like this episode, actually, I didn't find it all that cheesy and cornball. Like I found it kind of more straight than what happens later on. Like when you get to season
I think
3,
there can be some confusion as into Johnny's own character obsessions and his own like person that seems cheesy, but the actual like story, I don't feel that's that cheesy. Like
as someone who is both a fan of the series, and we won't talk about that, of the Karate Kid movies, and I haven't seen any episodes other than this one.
Yeah.
It didn't come off as cheesy to me. I felt like, and I wanted to ask you about where you would put the tone scale for this, Jamie, in a second.
What Batman is it?
I think it's I think it's satirical of the movies, and it's satirical of the hyper masculine 80s era that gave birth to the movies and the characters, but simultaneously it has reverence for all of that. So somehow it strikes this balance of satirical but also loving what it came from.
That's kind of what I wrestle with in my own intellect in some ways, is whether I'm watching it ironically or and I know I'm watching it unironically. I actually get excited like to turn on the next episode. And that's not, if I was watching it ironically, I probably wouldn't. But I'm literally like, I need to watch what happens next. It's a page turner for me.
So from an instructional standpoint, Jamie, how would you teach the tone scale for this one? It's tough.
This is one I'd almost be scared to to try to emulate.
Don't try it. Don't try to emulate it.
Because I have a feeling there'll be a lot of people that try to emulate it and they'll come off radically in one way or radically in the other.
They probably won't have the IP to lean on too.
They won't. They won't.
Yeah. It's necessary.
As for the pilot though, I don't know that it's all that unusual. Like I said, Jimmy, Jimmy's only watched the pilot. When you get to season 3, I mean, it's like bonkers Nickelodeon weird stuff with violence, and it's really odd because it really expands the world.
It's like it gets to the point where if you start to think about things too much, then you might start to fall apart a little bit for you.
Gotcha.
But the characters are so good, it doesn't matter. That's where you're at,
Like it's a show I really can't defend. Like if I stand against somebody and they said, well, that show's so stupid, blah, blah, blah happens and this and that. That would never happen in the real world. And this is so bad.
Right.
I really don't have a defense for it, but I can say that I just really like it. It's a really strange show in that regard. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk about the tone, was because
there's no Batman scale.
Like Jamie, I would even say, as something we talk about in the show often, there's so much coincidence in this show.
Yes.
And later on, even in this pilot episode, I think. But I don't care that there is. It doesn't bother me whatsoever.
But I would argue that this is comedy.
And it's because of the tone. That's what I'm saying, Jimmy. It's because there's a comedic element to it, and it actually surpasses that for me, not making me care. If I was watching The Sopranos and it had this much coincidence, it would bother me.
I actually think there is some huge charisma to William Zabka too. That
absolutely,
he really, in a weird, almost surprising sort of way, that he can pull this off.
We're not an acting podcast, but
and it's not. I don't even know that it comes down to acting so much. There's just something else. There's some it factor to him to watching in this role. I'm not sure that I want him in another role, but maybe I do. I don't know. But in this role, he just kind of nails it.
He was born to play Johnny.
So
young and old.
Yeah, so I don't know.
There's the way it's written, and I am talking a little bit farther too. The way it's written is there's an innocence to Johnny, even though he's like an 80s asshole bully. He is completely unencumbered by the society that we currently live in. Yeah. He doesn't know about computers or cell phones or what kids know.
Perfect. I can't wait to get to that
He's an
discussion.
innocent, so it's weirdly innocent while also being an ass.
Yeah. And by the way, Jimmy, when you do finally get around to watching this, it is one of those shows that you binge watch like that.
Yeah, you want more and more and more, and it's not enough.
You just you'll keep flipping the page. It's so anyway, I almost put this as a topic just to say there are a lot of things in this that are just work in a strange way, and I'm not sure how, but not necessarily in the pilot episode.
So you would say that you wouldn't advise, you proceed with caution if you're going to try to
pull this one off.
Write
Yeah.
a tone that is satirical of itself, and at the same time a reverence for what it's making fun of.
I can barely.
The characters aren't laughing though, you know.
Exactly. No, not at all. They're not winking.
It's real
not
for
at all.
Johnny. It's not a joke.
I
Not
can
at all.
barely think of a show or a movie or anything that functions on me like this show, like in this kind of weird way. I'm sure there's a few, but like I listened to a podcast about like Heat Vision and Jack the other day, and
Love Heat Vision and Jack.
Yeah, and I was thinking to myself like how that kind of works in this way a little bit, or something like that, you know. Which is those shows are few and far. I mean, Heat Vision and Jack had Jack Black, Owen Wilson, Ben Stiller, and couldn't get on the air. So that tells you how risky it is. You know, it's not exactly. It doesn't always work.
That pilot's on YouTube for anyone interested.
It is. Go check it out.
Structure.
Yeah. So, you know, Save the Cat's about structure. The one thing about this new book that I wrote, Save the Cat Writes for TV, go buy it now on Amazon. I would honestly say that while it has everything you need to know about Save the Cat, it has like 3 chapters in it that are pure Save the Cat. It's you know, distilling Save the Cat into its purest form. I consider this book like, if that's Dungeons and Dragons, this is advanced Dungeons and Dragons, because there's all these kind of added points and stuff that you have to do for your pilot. So assuming that you kind of have a feel for Save the Cat, and some people do, some people don't, I'll kind of go through it. The reason structure and pilots, the biggest difference is, and I won't break down the whole thing, but we'll kind of go through it. The biggest difference I found in pilots through analyzing a lot of pilots, and this came as a bit of a surprise, is well, let me explain one thing first. You can go find a calculator online. I think Save the Cat has one now too. And a lot of people, when they wrote pilots, they'd want to use Save the Cat. And what they do is they'd sit in front of these calculators and type in like 60 minutes, right? And then it would say, your catalyst needs to happen in the 4-minute mark or something like that. You know, it would just do the ratio. It'd crunch it down from 2 hours to 60 minutes or 30 minutes for a pilot. And what I found when I analyzed these pilots, that's not what they're doing. When you watch this pilot, if you just watch the first 20 minutes of this pilot, it almost is the same amount of time in this pilot that it takes to do the setup as it would for the feature film version.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
You know? And there's a reason for that, because the other thing that are really important to pilots are character. So if you go into a pitch meeting, almost every time I've ever gone into a TV pitch meeting, they always say, the most important thing is character, blah, 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 character. And that's all they say, okay? And knowing that, and I promise you that's what they're going to tell you. I promise. Every single pitch meeting I go to, they say character first. We care about the character, blah, 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 this character. And I think it's because, especially in TV, because if you're going to stick around with somebody, Walter White's going to become like more personal to you than maybe your brother or somebody. You know, you're going to know Walter White. You're going to know, in this case, Billy Zabka's character. That's your buddy. I mean, you're going to invite them back week after week, hour after hour. So it's really important to get to know character. So for that reason, Save the Cat, you can't just crunch the setup into 4 minutes and say, I'm done. It just doesn't make sense. So you need a 20-minute setup. You need to get to know that character. In fact, as you'll see, setup is kind of sprinkled throughout the whole thing. It goes almost a little 60 minutes. So all this is to say the major difference, the one secret I'll give away from the book, giving away all the secrets from the book, but you still are going to buy it, is in Save the Cat, one of the big gotchas that Blake Snyder always hits is page 12, that's the catalyst. Page 25, that's 25, don't argue with me. You know, that's the book. Well, here's what I'm going to tell you about pilots. In pilots, I think all the beats should be there, and you can use all the beats because that's how you get a cathartic story. That's how you get, oh, this person knows how to tell an all is lost. This person knows a midpoint twist. All those things are there. It's not just a setup. However, what I suggest is you use the Save the Cat beat sheet, like an itinerary, where where if you spend 30 minutes on the setup, well, you might have to rush your fun and games time. You know, it's a little like if you were in Disney World and you wanted to spend 20 minutes at the parade, you might only get 10 minutes to explore the Star Wars land or whatever.
Right.
So that's my suggestion with Save the Cat for TV pilots is you can spend extra time, and setup is the place you can spend extra time. And that was one thing a TV writer told me when I was doing the book. I did some research and I asked about this, and he said, oh yeah, that's definitely a thing. And he said, think about it this way. Your first act break, when act breaks in TV are commercial breaks, that's what they're called. They're called act breaks. So every act break is a commercial. That's what they are in TV. Your first act break is really important. Like if people aren't into the show, if they don't have buy-in to the characters and things like that, when that first commercial hits, they might just bail. They might flip the station. They might give you that first commercial. So a lot of stories take extra time getting to that act break. Like it might take 20 minutes to get to that first act break. And they do all that character stuff that you'd see in a feature film because they need to hook you in the same way a feature film needs to hook you and make you want to know what happens next and who you're on board with.
But it's more dire in a television show is what you're saying.
It's more
the
dire.
format itself, yeah.
Because they're going to decide in that little commercial break whether or not they punt the whole show. And you know, we see things on Netflix and stuff like that now, so they don't have commercial breaks. But it's kind of the same thing. Like I'll watch the first 10 minutes of a show. If it doesn't hook me and I find myself drifting to my computer or something,
you can easily leave.
There's so much choice now that's the competition. That's the new commercial.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Content.
It's content. There's so much content.
Never-ending options.
So anyway, that's what the book will walk you through. It'll walk you through some of that pilot breakdown stuff. And anyway, that's the major difference I wanted to mention. There are a lot of little differences, and we'll go through some of those too.
Do you want to talk about how this one doesn't exactly have a perfect Save the Cat for?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
So, and that's another thing that I realized analyzing a lot of pilots is there's two things you really have to do. You have to get in a certain mindset with pilots because it's easy to watch. By the way, I don't think Save the Cat works best as an analysis tool. I think it works best as a help you break your story tool, as an inspiration tool. So, and I've always said that. I say it's not a great, if you're going to get hung up on like, what's the all is lost of Seinfeld's first episode or something, you're doing it wrong. This is to help you stare at a blank page and say, what do I need to do? It's like a writing partner.
It's just like log lines. You can't reverse engineer a log line. It works better as an inspirational tool.
It's much better pulling things out of you, and that's why it doesn't work for everybody. But if you need it and you need that extra help, then I think it could be great help for you.
Yeah.
So here's the thing: when I started to analyze a lot of TV shows, one of the things you start getting hang up if you watch the whole season or the whole series. You start trying to, that works on your head a little bit. And you start like, oh, well, this is the setup to the thing. And you're trying to set up the whole thing where you really have to look at the individual episode and what that's trying to do, right? So what is this individual episode about? The tricky part that Jimmy was alluding to is normally a hero, goal, obstacle, stakes. That's what I'm looking for. So we have our hero, right? We have Johnny. What's his goal? This is the big trick in this episode. What is his goal in this episode? What do you guys think it is? Because I was having trouble.
If I'm using the right term here, I feel like the inciting incident is until he gets to the LaRusso car dealership, right? I mean, his goal until then is it's kind of just being alive and not being depressed, right?
Right. Yeah. For me, I was like, you really like challenged me to go, you know what? This isn't your typical hero, goal, obstacle.
Yeah, it's not
story. It's so inner focused.
It's inner focused.
It's so inner focused. I think the goal is to find purpose, which is to find the plan, right? This is it is a man with a plan franchise, right? So like the whole goal of the first episode is to figure out what the plan is. Quite literally, we open with him getting flat on the mat, and he has nothing to wake up for. He has no reason to get out of bed.
For 30
so
years.
it's literally a journey to figure out. It's like I said, I think the central story question of this first pilot is, will Johnny find a reason to get out of bed by episode's end? Will he get his ass off the mat?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I actually think it's one of these things that usually you would tell screenwriters never to do, where it's a character not wanting to do anything as opposed to a character who wants to do something. You know, he just wants to kind of stay in bed. And this is actually a problem in screenwriting.
It also, I think we've made fun of this too on the show before. I've made fun of it in life. Is never start a script with somebody waking up. Like never. It's such a cliche.
So I have a thing in my book that says skip breakfast.
Okay.
Yeah. I noticed that most TV shows, and I actually break down several really good pilots, actually have a breakfast scene. It's the second scene in the show almost always. And it's either a wake up or a breakfast scene. Yeah. And I could count a bunch of them. I mean, everything from Rick and Morty to Blackish to all kinds of things. The second scene is either a wake up or a breakfast scene. So I guess the pros do it. So we make fun of it, but the pros do it for some reason. So that's the tricky thing. Normally I would call you out if you brought me a script and said, well, my character's goal is to do nothing but stay in bed. Pilots are a little different. They're a little different in that regard. This one does have the legacy thing. But I agree. I think his goal is to try to, if I gave him a one, if I redirected it a little bit, I think it would be also, in a weird sort of way, trying to get out from the shadow of Daniel LaRusso's part of it too.
Yeah.
And by the end, the big change he has is that he's embracing that thing that he's trying to almost forget.
Could you simplify it by say like he's trying to run from the past and then he embraces the past?
I think that's kind of where my gut fell on this thing. So when I break it down to that, when I start thinking of the overall picture of it as that, then my catalyst becomes that fight he gets to outside the pizza place, or whatever. Yeah. It's not a pizza place; it's a 7-Eleven or whatever. Because that fight, it kind of, he even has a flashback. They use flashbacks to kind of show us like the old him coming back, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the rebirth of the old him for just a nugget, just a nugget, and then he pushes it back down, right?
Yeah.
And then almost in the reverse of the Karate Kid movie, because it really is mirroring the beats in some ways in a shadier kind of way. Because then the kid's like, "Hey, why don't you help me?" That's right, and he's like, "No, I'm not doing that." And he's back to the "No, I'm not doing that" stuff.
Dude, Mr. Miyagi is an alcoholic repairman.
Yeah,
that's right.
How fucking brilliant is that?
It's pretty brilliant.
And then when he finally decides to help, which Mr. Miyagi did out of kindness and love and stuff, he's doing it almost as a way to make money and selfish reasons.
Yeah, he's straight up
like
using the kids. Absolutely.
Yeah. So he's kind of got this other
the whole show is kind of about his vanity for a very long time. That's like the point. It's him. It's all about him.
So and that's my point about, like, if you looked at it from the bigger picture of the whole show, you might be like, well, what's the fun and games? Well, the fun and games has to be him fighting and karate. But if you look at it from a point of a guy just trying to push down the past and stuff, the fun and games might just be talking to his stepdad and saying, don't talk to me.
I'd argue that it was also just his idiosyncrasies of being out of time.
Yeah.
I think the fun part of Johnny to me is the music he listens to, the car he drives, how he doesn't understand now whatsoever. That's, to me, some of it, at least.
Absolutely. His trapped in the past passion about the past is what makes him funny.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, to get to some of the major things, like going through the story, and we'll spend a lot of time in setup, because again, I think setup is the most important thing in pilots, because the whole thing is a setup. Your whole pilot is a setup. The one thing I noticed when I analyzed all these television shows, and I probably watched 20 different pilots. I picked about 12 for the book. And I noticed there was this weird thing that kept reoccurring, and I call it the opening pitch. And the opening pitch, it's different for every show. But it's kind of like goes back to the Gilligan's Island theme. Remember the Gilligan's Island theme?
It literally tells the show
Just
pitch.
sit right back in
your hero tale, or the Brady Bunch, or Beverly Hillbillies.
So
or
theme
all these
songs
ones.
that told the story.
Right. So what I noticed was that pilots have replaced that with opening teasers. They do these teasers that a lot of times they have voiceover, like 50% of them had voiceover.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're like James Bond openings a little bit, like The Mandalorian has that a little bit. But you learn everything you need to about The Mandalorian. Like, I'm a bounty hunter. I kick ass. I have a harpoon on my back. I got this. You learn everything you want in the opening teaser, and it replaces those old songs that used to be there in some ways.
That's great.
Yeah, and in this case, what you need to know, and this show was made for the YouTube generation who might have not seen Karate Kid, so they needed to put in like where Johnny's mindset was in that little opening teaser. Just through flashback and stuff like that in history. So that's how this one uses that thing. But you'd be surprised if you go back and watch the pilots you watch, how much heavy lifting they do. Like, you could imagine if they didn't do that, how they might have to repeat all this stuff or talk about it or something like that. Instead, they just get it out of the way. They're like, scratch that off the list. Let's go from this point on. In procedural shows or like sitcoms, like Blackish, I can think of. Blackish has this opening 2-minute teaser where he just tells you, he pitches the show to you. He basically, in voiceover, it's a little montage and he's just pitching the show to you. He says everything the show's about. He mentions the theme. He does all that stuff. Grey's Anatomy does something similar. A lot of shows have characters giving speeches at the beginning that are stating their internals, So anyway, these teasers are super important.
It's funny that we're having this discussion only a week after the end of WandaVision, a show that didn't do anything you just said.
Yeah, WandaVision is definitely pretty weird.
I don't want to talk about WandaVision. I just find it interesting that we're coming on the heels of that. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, the WandaVision did it each episode.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But yeah, the WandaVision definitely is a weird animal.
Yeah.
It like the first 3 shows probably could have been cut out of a normal thing, and you probably could have started in the middle and and then started. But it would have been a completely different show. But yeah, so the opening teasers, that's that opening pitch thing I noticed that this did. And then it drops us into him waking up for breakfast. And it does a lot of the things normal setups need to do. And one of them that we were going to talk about is it gives us Johnny's rooting resume. And
there's a
Johnny's
word that we love, right?
That's right. That's right. So Johnny's rooting resume is basically a list of reasons we want to cheer, why we want to invite him back in week after week to our living rooms. We have to sell that as writers in that pilot episode. Like, that's critical for us to sell that in a very entertaining and fun way. And the weird thing about Johnny, because he's such an anti-hero, because he is the guy who wants to push, he kind of has that reverse rooting resume that we talked about in the past, where you basically can take the bullet points of a rooting resume and say, what's the opposite? What's right. I think Jimmy mentioned that he actually tracked as he does.
I tracked and I want to go back to it later because there's so much, and I feel like the reason this is an amazing pilot more so than anything else is because pretty much every single moment for 27 minutes is a rooting influencer.
Yeah.
And some of the reversals that's really good. So I'm going off of Jamie. You have 8 categories in the book.
Okay.
Of rooting influencers, right? You have.
I'll take your word for it. I didn't look it up.
I have Jamie's rooting
for sale
resume.
on Amazon.
Yeah, I have Jamie's rooting resume.
Let me go buy a copy right now on Amazon, as you can do for $24.95.
Okay, so in category 1, you have all the different ways you can communicate that the character is an underdog, right? And one of those ways you say is we're all weirdos, freaks, or nerds deep down, and we empathize with people that don't fit in. He doesn't at all empathize with people who don't fit in. He looks down at their vulnerability. Like he thinks people who are weirdos, freaks, or nerds are weak. And so that's one inverse. In category 2, it's great. Almost every category we're hitting here an inverse. In category 2, Jamie, you have something that says communicate all these different ways that they care about someone or something. And one of your and he does have a kid, and that's one of the things that he has a picture of his kid on the fridge, and we learn that he hasn't seen them for a while. And so that's a rooting influencer right now. But the reverse is, you said a cause, exclamation point. He has no cause. He is completely without purpose. So that's like another very interesting, and that's like typically like what you might find with
Interestingly enough, by the end of this episode, I think we'll add the cause to his resume.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Yes. Another category you have here, Jamie, of the ruining resume is they're fun, and there's lots of reasons he's fun, like we talked about, Bob, like the 80s, all his love of the 80s.
He brings back
hilarious.
all the nostalgia anyone would have. Right.
He drives a shitty Pontiac that's rotting, and he says it's a classic, and the guy who tows it is like, yeah, whatever.
It's also his like toxic masculinity is funny. Also, he is funny himself.
The line he says, he's like, I didn't call her a bitch. I said she was bitching at me. There's a difference. Like his attitude.
Yeah, he's not a genius either. Like that's also funny.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but two of the reverses, Jamie, you have here sweetness and charming personality. Right? He's not charming at all, and he's fucking mean and cold. And so those are two great inverses. Something you would see in Biff, which is perfect. 80s hyper masculine villain. 5, we know their struggle. You have all the different ways you can communicate how a character is struggling that makes us root for them. One of them, they confess their flaws. His problem is the opposite. He is unwilling to be vulnerable or admit that he's wrong or confess any sort of flaws. In his mind, he's flawless, right? Simultaneously, he feels like he's a loser, which is like a great character paradox, right? If you ask him, like, what are your flaws? He would say, I'm too cool. But if in reality, he feels like he's a loser. So that's another great.
Also because of other people.
Right. That's a good way to put it.
I don't think he blames the world or others more than himself.
That's right. Oh, yeah, Jamie, that was another one I wanted to ask you. That's in the next category. In one of your categories, there is the world treats them unjustly. I would say it would be the opposite, right? He blames the world for treating him unjustly, but the world is fine, right?
There are some things like I don't know.
I mean, come on, the pizza thing. Come on. There is some world building there about how the world is a pile of shit to him.
That's true. Yeah, it's true. That's true.
Yeah, like because things like the pizza thing, or even just they stuck in a job where he has to dig rats out of there's things like that.
Just get yelled at by rich people.
Those are the positives. Yeah,
they're the positives.
So okay, but the category, Jamie, in your book, I'm spoiling all of James' book here. For a rooting
just get the transcript and print it out. Give yourself the money.
This section, we wish we were more like him. Almost every single one of your possible ways to communicate, we wish we were more like him. He does the opposite, right? Self-sacrificing. He's beating up those teenagers to protect his car, not to protect Miguel.
Right.
Generous. Yeah. He couldn't. He tells him it's not my problem when the kid wants help. Loyal. He's not loyal to anybody except for himself. Smartest person in the room, like you said, Bob. He's not concerned with the things that
intelligence is not his key factor. And
yes,
the show plays on that as we go forward too.
In fact, it's a bit of a blind obsession.
It is,
situation where the reason he's funny is because he thinks he's the smartest one.
Right. Certainly not. Yeah.
And we know he's not. And that cracks us up.
And then my favorite one, that's so premise delivery, lives by an honorable code. This man lives by an unhonorable code. Strike first, strike hard, no mercy. So it's great. So there's a lot. I mean, look at how many inverses of that there are. on top of all the good ones we can get to later that make you care about him. Those are the ones that make you go like, yeah, he's a villain and he's a lovable villain.
Right. Yeah. And then, so kind of related to that, there's this idea in the book, like with this hero construction. And I actually think this is the weird thing about pilots. You have to create a hero that'll last many seasons.
Yeah.
And they're not going to change that much. He does change a little by little going throughout the whole thing. So to kind of make them sticky and to make them remind, you have to almost see their transformation for them and hope for it, but it's not coming. I have a thing in the book called the transformation map, and it's just kind of like I did that almost to put a character arc into. I think it could be useful for regular features as well. Transformation map. I did it to kind of give you an idea of what their transformation looks like. From beginning, from pilot to maybe season 10 or something.
Yeah.
So the good example would be like Walter White goes from Mr. Chips to Scarface. Like that would be his end. But on top of that transformational map, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, like, without spoiling anything, you could easily do that with where the show's going right now.
Yeah,
you know
absolutely.
What I mean? Where Johnny's ending. I don't want to spoil anything, but where he's starting to end up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's a good point.
Yeah. Well, and it's a bad point because I can't spoil it. But go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil it for anyone.
Yeah, and then so I feel like it's important to come up with that transformational map before you start writing the pilot, so you can hint at what it is. Because by the end of this episode, you'll want a viewer to have a feel for what it is. Jimmy, did you get a feel for what like his transformation might be by the end? Did you get any hints?
I wanted to ask you guys because I think it's instructive that it's not so simple.
It's a show about I like what the writers have. So we haven't really touched on it, but the writers said the movies are about black and white, and this whole show is about gray areas.
Right.
Which that's their intention with the show specifically. It's like Johnny. I think the pilot sets him up as the hero, but I don't think the show is concerned with which one is the hero actually.
Oh wow, okay. I haven't gotten farther.
Yeah, that's the one thing this doesn't show, Jimmy, that I should. And it's really not a spoiler, but this show is equally about LaRussa later on. As it is.
Literally, the second episode is what this episode is for Johnny to Danny.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of tricky that way.
So because I know Bob hasn't read it yet.
I will.
No, that wasn't a judgment. Yeah, that was a passive aggressive jab. Sure. Since Bob hasn't read it,
I ordered it. Yeah.
So busy with things.
Jamie, you have the for listeners. You want to? I'll hit the bullet points and then you can expand on it and then we can bounce back and forth.
Yeah, sure.
So you have the construction. The sticky hero construction is you need a flaw, you need a shard of glass, you need a want and a need, and those are the ingredients that you put into the transformational map. So for flaw, there's so many, right? It's like It's like Groundhog Day level, where there's like a dozen different things that he needs to change, which we can get in when we get into the things that need fixing. But the main ones are he's stuck in the past, he lacks responsibility, and he hates himself and others, which to me pointed to like a core flaw of self-loathing. I just call him self-loathing. To me, all of his problems spur from a core self-loathing. He fucking hates himself.
He failed 30 years ago, and he's hated himself every day since. That's
exactly. That is a perfect segue into his shard of glass, which is humiliated by Daniel and his sensei at the 1984 All Valley tournament.
Yep.
And then for want, I think it's pretty simple. He wants a lot of things. He wants love. He wants money. He wants power. But mainly, he wants respect. No one respects him. And he wants revenge against Daniel for the loss and the pain of 34 years.
Yep.
But the need, Jamie, tell me, and you guys can bounce off me if you think the need is. Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, well, all I was going to say is this is something that probably only the writers knew at the pilot anyway. You know what I mean? Like they kind of hint at it. There's some thematic stuff, but whatever you say what the need is, probably it's your best guess at this point. You know
at this point, I think the need is self-love.
Yeah. No, I think you're right.
You're right. Yeah, I would agree with that. Having seen the show completely. Yeah.
But it's also how do you get that? You have to overcome trauma. You have to gain responsibility. You have to love others, and yeah.
So in relation to that, and I think you nailed it. You nailed all those things, because I would have put the want at self-respect, or I'm sorry, not self-respect, respect from others.
Respect, yeah,
because the want is usually the thing they think will make them happy. Right. So they think if everybody just bows down to them and says, "You're right, Johnny," that'll make them happy. But the real fix is something deeper that they need to do.
Which we haven't talked about it, but I think that's where his father-in-law comes in. Or his father-in-law, his stepdad comes in.
Stepdad.
We haven't really touched on that, but isn't that the whole scene about him not ever having love? Yeah. He only understands respect. He never has understood actual love.
Yeah. No one taught him.
No one taught him love. Right.
How would he know?
You're right. He wouldn't.
And that gets to the next thing in the book. I have this thing called a broken compass. And the broken compass is it came from this idea that when you pitch TV shows, you kind of have to say, well, what is their flaw and how does that show up week to week? Like that's something they ask you for. Or the better shows have. It's like, look, it's better to pitch a character's flaws and say, look, this is how it's going to show up week to week. And remember when we talked about Groundhog Day and we said the best stories attack the flaw constantly?
Yeah.
Well, that's that. If you have to come up with something before you write 5 seasons, this was a tool, that I put in the book to help you come up with it. And the idea I had was, if you write almost their mission statement, their broken mission statement, like what is Johnny, if Johnny wrote out like all the things he believed in terms of always and never, what would it be?
Like hot babes and beating up like girls. It would be like, it'd be so terrible.
Yeah, it would be like, I will always strike first or whatever.
Right. It would just be terrible.
Like that. Jamie, yeah. I fucking love this technique that you've created.
After I made it up, I've been using it, and it seems very useful. When I get into a scene, I can look at that mission statement and see how the character would react in the scene. That's what I use it for.
That's awesome, because in the book you do a great job of giving examples of various shows and characters and their mission statements. So in the book there's a big long list of I will never, I will always, I will never, always for various characters that we're familiar with. And we're constantly talking in this show about wrong way approaches and wrong way goals. And this is a great way to brainstorm how to visualize that, right? Because the constant challenge as a writer is how do you make what the character is going through vocally and visibly measurable? And this is like a perfect way to brainstorm ideas. So I thought there were some pretty funny ones with Johnny. I said, I will never accept help from others. That shows up over and over again. I will always hide my feelings. Right. I will never admit when I make a mistake. Right? Like he puts the TV up on this door.
Right.
This was one that struck me, Jamie, that before your exercise, I didn't notice this in the pilot, and then watching it back after this exercise, I will always fight back. He fights back with the TV client. He fights back with his boss who fires him. He fights back with the mini mart clerk. He fights back with the homeless lady. He fights back with the bullies. He fights back with Miguel. He fights back with his stepdad. He fights back with the girls who hit his car. And then in the end, after he leaves Daniel's presence, he vows to fight back against Daniel.
Isn't that also a slight rooting influencer kind of there? That
Absolutely.
Even though he's doing it kind of selfishly, we're kind of somebody who fights for themselves. You want them to succeed in some way, right?
And then, Jamie, bouncing off your book, some things we'll get to later, the one whiff of change compass, I will never help others.
Right. Great.
Because in the end, he says, he says, I'm going to be your sensei.
Kind of like a Han Solo kind of like, I won't stick my neck out for others. Or, it's me first.
Right.
This is my favorite thing and I haven't read the whole book. I've read about 100 pages of it for this podcast.
More than Bob, at least.
I have read 0, so I've read the back cover.
I mean, this podcast was to pitch the book, so that's why we're doing it. Yeah,
it's great. It sounds really good. Now I wish I didn't even have to buy it. I could have just listened to this podcast. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Just print out the transcript. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
But yeah, the compass. I stole your thunder there.
Oh no, you didn't.
Okay.
I don't think you did. That was perfect. That was good time.
Okay.
That's a really good name for it too, Jamie. It's a good title for that technique.
Well, my thing about it too is if you have one of these, and I think it could be worth. I use it for feature scripts too. Here's what it does for you. Let's say you have a catalyst. Then you can look at it. A catalyst. Obi-Wan says, "Luke, come on the mission with me." And you can look at the, Luke's broken compass, and you can say, how does he react here? And it can kind of turn your script in those debate sections and those funny games. It turns them into hero. It really is a hero-driven, hero-first story. If you take that and say, how would they react?
Yeah.
And then you can use it to ask yourself, like, well, how should they react? Instead of just coming in with plot, like, I need them to do this, I need them to do that. And you can also ask, like, what catalyst? How can I tweak my catalyst or something to really push against that?
Yes.
Broken compass.
It's a great way to it's a great way to brainstorm contrasts in the scene, right? Characters with as like opposing viewpoints that push this to the limit, right? That push these broken compass mindsets to the limit.
And the funny thing is that I give an example in the book that's almost identical to a scene that happens in this particular pilot. So in Better Call Saul, there's a scene where Saul is kind of in a similar thing, like he's struggling to get money. I think he's going to get kicked out of his office in the pilot. And then right before the first commercial break, the first act out, he gets a check in the mail. And I think it's from his brother or his brother's law firm, and he tears it up. It's like he finally got the help he needs, and he tears it up.
Yeah,
and that's because he has a code. He's got this code.
That's right.
Just like Johnny has a code. He's going to tear that. Johnny might be this repulsive guy, but he's not taking money from that stepfather.
I would argue he does it twice, Jamie. He tears up his stepfather's thing, but he also tries his best to refuse help from LaRusso.
Yep.
That's right.
He does not
You're
want
absolutely right.
to accept it. Because his code is LaRusso is all things wrong with the world. Right? Yeah.
So his code is causing these problems in his life.
Yeah.
He could finally get help. He could shake hands. He could be nice. He could make nice with LaRusso. But instead, there's no way. I'd rather not have the thing I love most, which is my Pontiac, whatever. I'm not. It's funny how important that car becomes too, in sort of a weird sort of way. Because even the one moment of joy he gets is when he turns I think it's head games. Right. He's driving around, and it's like, yeah. And that's like the one moment of joy. Yeah. And it's that car and it actually kind of sets up an all is lost when the car gets damaged. Because
the car is his like bubble, his safety bubble.
It's his best friend in some ways. It's
right,
his magic.
Right.
So
yeah.
So on top of that, the last thing in setup, and we've kind of gone over these things, that's really important that you need to put in are the things that need fixing. But keep in mind that all these things we're talking about, the weird thing about pilots is you can not only do you have them in the setup and you need them in the setup, and Johnny has a ton of things that need fixing.
Dude.
But you could put them throughout the story. But go ahead, Jimmy.
Oh my God, here comes.
Jimmy's got a list. Jimmy's got a list.
They're so good. No, we've talked about this in many episodes.
This is a movie thing as well. Yep.
It's a movie thing because I read amateur scripts all the time. That's my job. I read about 40 pages of amateur screenplay a day, 5 days a week. And what I see all the time is a setup with one thing that needs fixing, and that's it. Or two things that needs fixing, and that's it. And that doesn't make for a transformational journey.
Right.
And those things may be really interesting and really well crafted, but once you follow that for another 30 minutes, like you're done. Like you need more. And so this is going back, Jamie, to the original Save the Cat material that I'm referencing here.
That's right.
The Blake Snyder stuff. The 6 things that need fixing generally fall into 5 categories. And so I'm going to set up the categories, and like Johnny has like a dozen in each category. Changes in attractiveness, false beliefs, or personality, strained personal relationships, not being entrusted with responsibility or not able to handle responsibility, being invisible to key people, and others don't believe in you or you've given up on yourself. So section 1, changes in attractiveness, false beliefs, and personality. He drinks too much, he takes shitty care of himself, and he looks like shit. For Johnny, like we know what Johnny could look like, right? He's racist. He says, oh, great, more immigrants. He's sexist. He's aggressive, and he expresses toxic masculinity still from like his 80s machismo. He hates himself. He hates everyone else. He's heartless, and he mocks vulnerability. And also, he doesn't recycle. Like that's
also he's dirty.
Yeah, he's just dirty.
He's a slob. Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Strained personal relationships. Every single person in the movie, he has a strained personal relationship. His boss, his clients, his neighbors, the convenience store clerk, his son, who he hasn't seen in years, his stepdad, Daniel. Every single person he encounters, he has a strained personal relationship. Not being entrusted with the responsibility or not able to handle responsibility. It's both, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Being invisible to key people. He literally seeks isolation. He says, I've lived in this shithole for 10 years. The pipes don't work. The fountain's full of piss. And the only good thing about it here is I don't have to talk to anybody. He's invisible to his rich clients whose house he repairs. He's invisible to the local bully teens. They blow like vape smoke in his face.
Right.
Yeah. The jogger he hits on thinks he's a joke. The homeless woman thinks he's there to steal his turf. Like he's not even seen as like, she dehumanizes him after her own dehumanization. Others don't believe in you or you've given up on yourself. It's both for that, right? He's given up on himself and others don't believe. So like, look at all those things that need fixing. And that's like, you know, that's more than 6. That's like 50.
Yeah. And here's another key thing about things that need fixing. If you're deciding like what kind of scenes to put in your setup, the guidance I usually give is try to write scenes that show how the flaw is causing things that need fixing. So when you're coming up with your setups, then that kills 2 birds with 1 stone, so to speak, you know, because it's both showing the flaw, it's showing how their broken compass is screwing things up, but it's also showing the things that need fixing that have to happen. And that's true for a feature or for a pilot. The big thing I wanted to say about a pilot, and I listed this under funny games in our notes, but it's really not funny games, is some of these things that need fixing will not get fixed till much later. They won't get fixed in the pilot. And that's one of these weird advanced Dungeons and Dragons things that happens in pilot writing, because you need to know the balance. You do need setup and payoff in your pilot, but you don't need everything set up and payoff because the audience knows that there's a future.
Right.
They want to watch next week. So
right.
These things won't all get fixed. So that's why I wrote that under the fun and games. I call it, it's kind of set up and much later, or wait for it, payoff.
I love it.
I don't want to spoil much, but I also find it interesting that while we're talking about how he has the broken compass and what needs fixing, I find it interesting how they approach this season. The first season is that when you find out how Johnny views his old sensei, and you find out that Johnny's actually aware of that character's broken compass and that character, and what that character needs fixing, and it opens up all this nuance about Johnny, where like, you know, he knows that he got a broken compass, but he's also completely unaware of it.
So he doesn't know that guy that Reese is a negative self-reflection. Like he doesn't know that guy is like a reflection of him. Like he's become that guy.
Yes, there's shades of that. There's
Yeah.
He knows Reese is not. He knows Reese had his problems.
Right.
Yes,
He
he's
definitely
aware.
thinks he's angry with him and stuff like that.
Like
when
he
finally
was
comes
the
back.
he looks at him as like the broken father that he had that showed him the wrong road. Yeah.
Yep. That's season 3 stuff.
Oh,
But,
damn.
Well, no, that's season 2. That's they
Is it?
yeah, that's season.
Yeah, you're right.
Reese comes back in season 2. That's spoilers. You know that. You know he's back.
I know.
Yeah.
I've seen the.
You've
I've
seen the trailers and shit.
Marketing.
Yeah,
Marketing.
right.
Yeah.
This thing goes to so many different crazy angles, Jimmy, that
I'm sure
it really
Hilary
gets-
Swank
it
is going to
gets
be
big.
there. Hilary Swank's coming back. We all know it. Come on.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But that brings us to fun and games, right?
well, that's what I was going to say is
we kind of touched
I
on
put
it.
that
but-
in there. The fun and games is kind of weird in this. It's skimped over. It's not exactly like your typical like. When I said if we were writing the feature version of this would need karate and things like that. And that's what I mean by when you think of your pilot story, you have to think about how small it is. It doesn't have to have the fun and games of the show necessarily, because it again, and this one does. I think you're absolutely right that some of the fun and games is seeing Johnny in the modern world. That's the real fun and
fish out
games
of
of this.
water. basically.
Yeah, but it doesn't. It doesn't necessarily have Cobra Kai in the pilot, which is really the fun and games of the thing. Is bringing back Cobra Kai and him being a teacher is another part of the fun and games. Pilots don't need all of that because you do have lots of story to tell. So again, you pick and choose your battles. You have to choose what is important, and that setup is so important. And as long as you can make that setup entertaining, which this one is massively entertaining, then you don't necessarily need the fireworks that might come in the feature film version of this that would have all that stuff and might rush to
Right.
it.
If this was a film, him and Danny would have been fighting like
They'd have to fight and
like
things
80
like
minutes
that.
in. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the fun and games. And this one also, because the want is so loose, it's hard to figure out what the midpoint is exactly too. Because what's the big twist? The father coming in seems almost like B story stuff. And it's another, what you find with the B story beat in pilots is sometimes that B story beat sets up the B story for the show. So him and his dad, him and his kid, that's set up in that B story beat, right? It's not necessarily the B story for the episode. Sometimes it's like,
Gotcha.
that's what hits right there, in that funny game spot where the B story usually lands, and then it's set up and it pays off later on. You find that all the time.
Would you also agree that fun and games could apply to just since it's an IP, just the act of seeing him and Daniel talk again? Doesn't that counts as fun and games? Maybe not conventionally, but
Sure, it sure does. It doesn't really hit the fun and games spot. Like, to me, fun and games is less about trailer moments. I know that's a big, because in movies it usually is trailer moment.
Yeah.
But to me, it's always about, like, when you take the log line, what's the story you came to see? And in this one, we talked about that the story we came to see was a guy trying to not do anything in some ways. So our fun and games is really a guy trying
I'd
to
argue
avoid.
some people are watching the show. They came to see the show for those two.
The confrontation.
Yeah, like that's what I'm saying. Like, some people are watching the show for that moment.
I'm not arguing that at all. I think that's absolutely true. I think it's a little different to say, like, your log line for the pilot
wouldn't be
isn't
that.
your log line for the
Agree.
show. Yeah, your log line for the show is to watch Danny and him fight. So that has to happen over the course of the show. But the log line for the show is really it's more structural, and the fun and games of it is really about a guy not wanting to do shit. And what changes that, and this is why I peg it as my midpoint, is when he watches Iron Eagle on TV.
Yeah.
And he gets this magic message from a mentor. And then
That's the classroom scene, isn't it? Isn't that the classroom scene?
Yeah, that's it.
basically is.
Yeah, it's Iron Eagle, right?
And the other thing you find with pilots, so here's a key thing with a pilot that I've also found: the theme of the pilot episode should be the theme of your show. So episode 5 might not be the theme of your show. Episode 5, the theme might be money changes everything or something. Who knows? I don't know what it is, because it could be a bottle episode. It could be anything. But your pilot episode should really hit the theme of your show. And I think that kind of tells, he has a gift and he should use it and stuff.
Yeah.
He shouldn't be hiding away. And, I think it really hits at a theme, an overall theme for Johnny for the show, at least. And it hits right at that midpoint. And then it's a false victory because what happens next? The commercial comes on with Daniel LaRusso, and that sets him off in an internal bad guys close in kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where he goes out and gets drunk and does, drives his car around.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, the all is lost. I peg the all is lost as his car getting hit and the daughter being there. The Dark Night of the Soul is him having to face. I'm just rushed through this to get to our next bullet point. The Dark Night of the Soul, I would peg as him talking to Daniel LaRusso and Daniel LaRusso trying to give him money and, because he's suffering essentially. He's kind of he's wallowing in this Daniel LaRusso crap that set him on the bad guys close in the first place. Like he's got to deal with this. But then, so here's the big thing I wanted to get to, and the final thing we'll talk about is, do you have something?
I wanted to say I think one of the genius things about the show, with I guess this sort of plays on what you're saying, but is that we talk about how like he's so low after 30 years of being a failure. He's so low on the line, and the thing that he envies and the thing that he hates that he views as success is a guy being a car salesman. Like that's how low we're talking. Like, you know what I mean? Like, is LaRusso's life really that glamorous? Like, it's fine, it's normal, but he is a car salesman. I would just say they didn't like reach for the stars. LaRusso is not a famous karate fighter or instructor.
Right.
That fight didn't actually determine anything about their lives.
Right. In fact, most people have forgotten about it.
Yeah, they don't give a crap.
They're the only two that care about it.
That's it. Yeah. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's funny. So here's the other big thing. Again, you won't have to buy the book now that I tell you the big secret sauce I found analyzing all this stuff. What I discovered, and this took me some soul searching and a lot of analysis, but what I realized is a lot of TV pilots don't have finales. They have break into threes. And the break into three is the break into series. So it's like, so what happens? Johnny goes to this all is lost. His car gets messed up. He meets Daniel. He has to see Daniel. Daniel kind of gives him crap. He can't take it. And then what's he do? He makes a big decision that's going to put him in a new direction. In the movie, that new direction would play out in the finale, right? He'd make a choice. He'd be like, I'm going to fight in the tournament or something. And then the fight would happen. That would be the gather the team, the blah, 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 the blah, blah, blah. But in some TV pilots, not all, but some TV pilots, and a lot of them, once they make that big decision, we're out. That's next week. Because and it was a major discovery that I found, and it was kind of a eureka moment that I found, was that pilots don't always have finales. Pilots have this big change decision sometimes at the end that then leads to the next week, because it's not over, so you don't have a finale. Some pilots do have finales. Some do have a moment where they then decide, and then they go through another thing, and then they make a change. But a lot of them do not. And what happens in those, then the finales are almost always, and I can point to a couple as examples, they're usually montages. They're like gather the team montages is what they are. And in this case, tying the headband, doing the thing.
It's an 80s montage, man.
Yeah. And usually there's this thing I call the whiff of change stated. So in a pilot, I believe there has to be some whiff of change. So the character doesn't arc. The character doesn't change. All the things that need fixing don't get fixed. The flaws don't go away. But there's a hint that puts them on the trajectory, right? And in this case, Johnny doing something, something to get out of bed, something that's going to put him on a course of learning throughout the many seasons that come. The other big thing I learned from analysis is almost all of these shows, almost all of them have this thing I call the whiff of change stated. So the marvelous Mrs. Maisel, like at the end, she has a thing where she asks somebody, do you like being a comedian? And it's Lenny Bruce. And he's like, yeah. And she's like, he likes it, and you can see that she's saying she likes it. Or I'm spoiling these shows now. The end of the pilot episode of Barry, somebody comes up to him and says, he's at a diner, and he goes, he's talking to this girl. He says she's an actor, and he says, I'm an actor too. This one ties the thing up. I'm your sensei. It's amazing how many episodes do this, almost to the point that I think if you're writing a pilot episode and you're breaking the story, go to your finale and write that thing into the finale.
Write
in your
the
outline.
line, basically.
Just write it.
Yeah,
Write it, and then earn it, and then go and earn it, because it happens in so many of these damn things that it almost feels like you should do the same, because it's pointing us to next week. It's getting us there. It's saying we have the setup. We're the thing. We're going to move forward. We're on the path. Everything's in motion.
Lost, the last line of the pilot is, guys, where are we?
Yeah, there you go. There you go. There you go.
Yeah,
you just made me think. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's amazing how many of these are, and a lot of them that I break down the book, I'd say 75% of them have the whiff of change stated. I mean, just to give you a bad example, like Rick and Morty ends with I'm trying to think, is Rick or Morty the guy? It's Rick is the uncle, right? Is it Rick or is it Morty?
Rick.
I can't.
Rick is his grandpa.
Yeah, I should just do it from Back to the Future.
Bob, I feel like this would make an amazing supercut.
Oh yeah, well, if you want to give me all those clips, I'll have to download them. Sure.
Oh no, that's true. It'd be easy to find them at least. They're all in the very
They're all in
last
the
scene.
very end, last scene of the pilot.
But at the end of
I
Rick
was
and Morty,
joking.
Yeah.
at the end of Rick and Morty, he's even going, "It's Rick and Morty. It's Rick and Morty forever. It's Morty and Rick. It's Morty and Rick." And he just keeps saying it, and it kind of just says that's what
the show is
about.
And it is.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a key thing I found through analysis, through again watching like 20 of these, and I kept seeing it, and I'm like, "Oh, they did it again." And I wrote it down. But again, Cobra Kai did it, and it surprised me because I didn't watch Cobra Kai for analysis for the book, and there it was. It was right there in the end. So anyway, that's my finale for this.
And that's why they should buy the book,
breaking.
because you don't talk about this, you talk about other stuff.
That's right.
And that's why you want to purchase that book.
That's right. That's right. That's why I'm not going to give you the finale to the book. You have to go and buy it and read it just to break into. This is your break into.
Jamie you have a whole series of books you're gonna write, but that's the pilot book, right?
This is when you decide to go make that purchase right now.
A call to action.
Yeah, right.
And by March 30th, you can get an audiobook read by me. It'll sound just like this podcast. Or you can get
literally better
Kindle,
because it's not online. But yeah,
that's right. Yeah. Without the dropouts.
Without the dropout and freezing.
We edited those parts away.
I think a lot about the people who have only heard the pandemic episodes and how different
they
must
sound.
Feel to them. Just in general, like we're
it's fun. We'll get back to it one day.
We're usually like in a room, hyper focused with high quality sound.
Yep.
It's weird.
The president was on just the other night, and he said podcasts may resume in person by July 4th. He said that.
The important issues addressed.
Rock and roll.
Yeah.
He said, I just want to let you know, Thunder Grunt will be in person by July 4th. That's what he said.
My dream come true.
That would be amazing.
Do you guys have anything left to say about Cobra Kai? I think we covered everything we wanted to.
I think it's a really instructive pilot to watch.
Yes,
and I would say, I'd go far as to say, and I'm sure Jamie you would agree, it's an instructive show if you keep going.
It is. I love it.
I really do. They do everything that I could possibly want as a fan of the franchise.
Just don't make me defend it, because there's things about it I can't defend. But I do love it.
It doesn't take place in our reality. Let's say that.
Right.
It takes place in an off reality where karate matters.
In a post 1984 All Valley tournament world.
There's shades of once again, not spoiling it, but I think Danny LaRusso's wife is kind of the character of the person that Jamie was arguing with, where she kind of realizes it's all ridiculous.
She's a little bit the everyman outside.
Yeah. She realizes that warring karate dojos is really stupid and a thing that shouldn't exist and would never exist, but it does. So yeah.
And just like we said, again, I don't really think it's a spoiler, but the kids play a major part in the series as well.
The kids are a whole other beast almost from what we talked about today.
It almost is an equal. It's almost like a 3-part story where it's like LaRusso's family, Johnny's crew, and then the whole high school kids and stuff like that. Yep.
Which the pilot does not really delve into the high school as much as the show actually eventually does. So
right.
They hooked you into Johnny though.
Yeah, he did. Are you gonna finish it, Jimmy? Or are you gonna actually watch it when you have time?
I'll get there.
When you have time.
I'll put it this way: revisiting Karate Kid 1 and 2 for this series is the first movies I've watched since January. So,
okay. Well, outside of Jamie's book, which I feel like we've plugged ad nauseum for 90 minutes, do we have anything else? You guys have anything else you want to plug?
Nope.
Okay, good.
Garden State Film Festival.
Right.
Comedy of Horrors. Check it out if you
Jamie,
like.
that's so awesome. You got something
man.
You're directed as well. Jamie's on fire.
That's right. Premiere
this
of
pandemic is when
Comedy
Jamie
of
flourished,
Horrors.
man.
There you go.
I want to plug the fact that if you go to youtube.com/Thundergrunt podcast, it's a mirror of the entire Thundergrunt podcast on YouTube. And you can listen, if you prefer listening to episodes like that, you can listen to them there. And I have another show that actually has video, that I actually record video sometimes. So you can actually see my dumb face if you want that. But yeah, that's up. You don't have to listen to that, but youtube.com/Thundergrunt podcast if you like watching or listening on YouTube. I don't know what people prefer. So I think that's everything, guys.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Thanks,
can we tease the next episode?
Absolutely.
I like doing this now. Now the guys
like a James Bond movie.
Yeah. Now
James Bond will return.
This is our break into 3. It's our break into 3.
That's right.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
The guys are humoring me this time. It's gonna be very much, I feel like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles episode.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm pretty down with this, dude. So.
Yeah, because Jamie's like 10 years older than us, so he was like in his 20s when the Mighty Ducks came out. I'm sure it wasn't as impactful for him. But we're going to do the Mighty Ducks since the series is coming out. We're going to do the 1992 Mighty Ducks.
I feel like it's as instructive as some of the great sports movies, though.
Absolutely.
So,
do you know if it's on any of the streamers, maybe Disney?
It's on Disney Plus,
yeah. Okay. Because Disney's Disney's doing the sequel show thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So before that episode, anybody rewatch it, Disney Plus. You'll be ready.
Out there.
Yeah, get ready.
Yep. Yeah,
Mighty Ducks.
I can't wait. I use it, and I'll revisit this when we get there. I use it as an example so often with sports scripts that I get.
I don't think we've done a sports movie either.
We haven't. No, and
Yeah.
My thing. Well, we'll get into it next time. But one of my favorite movies is The Bad News Bears.
Yep.
So to me, it's a Bad News Bears.
If I had to choose, I would have actually chose Major League. That would have been me.
Okay.
But I love Mighty Ducks too, so I'm down with either.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm excited.
Well, we're doing Mighty Ducks.
Thank you for humoring me, guys.
Yeah. Well,
I had many a Mighty Ducks T-shirt for some reason.
We can say this
because the team became the Anaheim team became, or not Anaheim, or was it? Yeah, it was Anaheim. I think.
Anaheim. Yeah.
We'll say
I'm not a hockey guy.
Jamie, despite your your distaste for doing the Ninja Turtle episode, it is our highest downloaded episode.
Yes, it is.
By hundreds.
Right, seriously.
So I expect
almost.
the same of this.
Yeah, right. So help us prove to Jamie that it matters.
I could see a Mighty Ducks versus Ninja Turtles movie. I could kind of see it.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Hockey sticks.
I want to see that written by Jamie Nash is what I want to see.
That's right.
Oh, hell yeah.
Casey Jones plays for the Ducks.
Hell yeah.
There's connective tissue there. Why not? Right.
But Jamie, thank you for this instructive
lesson. Thanks, man.
I feel like I learned a lot. It's awesome.
Great. Thanks for doing it. And everybody go buy that book.
Please.
Buy the book.
I did.
Need your money.
Buy the audio book too when that comes out.
Yes. Buy the audio. You can hear me talk. For hours. For hours and hours.
All right. Thanks for listening, guys.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
You have just listened to Writer's Blockbusters, a screenwriting podcast featuring two professionals and another guy. Available only on Thundergrunt.